In this lesson, we're going to create a responsive design for this layout. So I'm going to minimize this and then start resizing. Let's make it a little bit taller here so you can see all of it. So as I resize, it still stays the same, but notice how it's adjusting. So even though I had originally set this at like 300 pixels and then 800 pixels for the other part of the div, it's adjusting for us. And when I reach one point, notice how now those margins on the side disappeared. And let's go a little bit further. And you're going to see how now they stack on top of each other. So that's our goal for this lesson. So open up your Roar Bikes where you left off last, and we're going to do some editing. The first thing we're going to do isn't necessarily related to responsive design, but is more related to the gaps that you see here. And so we're going to get rid of those just to start. Don't do anything where you see like nav UL and nav LI. We're not going to get rid of those margins. Those adjust how far away this text is from each other. We're going to find like here where it says side 1. So this is the margin that goes around that picture. We're going to delete that. We're going to delete the side 2. We'll delete it from the main, and it looks like the main 3, or the H3. Actually, no, I didn't want to do that one. That was adjusting for the H3. I want to save that one. We'll undo that. Okay, so save it, and then refresh and see how you did. So it looks like we got rid of all of them. Now, if you wanted to add it back in, I want to show you another option you have. So it's just one more trick that you can add in. So up in the grid selector, we're going to add in grid gap, and then we're going to however many pixels we want. So if you wanted it to just be 5 pixels, you can type that in. And notice how now we have that gap, and we can adjust that easily. The one thing with this is it's going to be a gap that you see on every single section. And where we had before with the margins, we could adjust just for specific areas. So we'll leave that for now, just so you can see it. Now, the next thing we need to do is, right now our columns are set at fixed numbers. We're going to go ahead and we're going to change that. So we're going to put some new percentages in, and that way, no matter how big our screen is, it'll be a percentage of the screen. So we're going to have the first margin column, this column be 10%. Have the picture side be 20%. And we'll have 60% for the remaining content, and then remaining 10%. That way it's going to be centered on the page. So you see it kind of spreads out a little bit, and I could adjust it to be a little bit closer, but 10% works for the margins. So let me resize this so you can kind of see. So now you'll notice that as I resize, it's adjusting to it. We have some things though that aren't perfect there. Okay, the rows we can leave for now. We might come back and adjust those later because we're going to notice that text probably isn't going to completely fit if we don't have it set at auto. But let's go ahead and scroll all the way down, and we'll do our first responsive design. So we want to stop at the right before the end of the style section. So we're in the style section, and we're going to create a media query. So to do that, you want to type at media, and there's no space between that. Then we have a space, we type only screen and then in parentheses, you're going to type max hyphen width colon, and then we're going to have our first breakpoint as 1,000 pixels. What that means is when this screen here gets to be 1,000 pixels or less, it's going to change to the new layout that we're going to define. Okay, so let me put those curly brackets in. We're going to actually have multiple of these because everything between these curly brackets will relate to this media query. So now we're going to use the grid class selector, the one with the period in front of it, and we're going to redefine those columns. So we're going to do grid template columns, and we're going to get rid of the margins. So we're going to only have 2 columns. They're each going to be 50%. And then we're going to redefine areas, grid template areas. And if you remember from before, we had period, header, things like that. We're getting rid of the period because we no longer want to have that extra space on the edge. So we're just going to say header, header. Next one is nav, nav. And then we have side 1 and main. And it's not really changing too much. Just getting rid of that space. And we'll add the footer. So as I save and I refresh this, enlarge this again so you can kind of see where it was. So there's a little bit closer to full screen. And as we resize and we hit that 1,000 pixel mark, we got rid of those extra margins on the side. Let's do another one. So again, remember this curly bracket and this one are for the grid, the grid selector. And then this one and this one, it's for the media query. So we're going to click after that and do our next media query for a smaller mobile size. So we're going to do at media again, and then only screen. And this time we're going to say our max width is 600 pixels. And again, the curly brackets for the media query, and then we're going to redefine the grid. And we're going to do grid template columns. I'm just going to call this auto, and then grid template areas. And now they're going to just stack on top. So we just are going to have lots of sections. Oops, I need my quotes there. This is where when you're designing, you have to kind of think, what's the order that I want things to stack on top? Okay, so I'll save that, refresh it. Let's see what it looks like. And when you get to 600, you're going to see they start stacking. So I have a picture, I have text, and then I have a picture. Now, do you notice our problem we have here? So this is where that row height is probably going to have to be adjusted because we can see that it's not fitting within what we had defined previously. So I'm going to go back up here, and under the rows section, I'm going to say repeat. And then in parentheses, you're going to do auto and then a comma to separate how many you're going to have. So in this case, we're just saying that we have 4 rows. I still want my footer to take up a lot of space, so I'm going to put 500 pixels for that one. So we'll save that, refresh it, and now you'll see that this is adjusting to the right height that we need. Okay, so just auto fits it. So I can go through that process, resize it, and you can kind of see how it adjusts. Okay. We're also, one other thing I want to show you is the grid gap. So we left the grid gap. Now you can get rid of things. So let's say you liked grid gap when you were in full screen, but you don't really like it when you're down here. You don't like how those separate. So what you can do is that would be the 600 pixel width. So we scroll down to that, and that would go within this grid. So I'm going to say grid gap, and I'm going to say 0 pixels, and then watch what happens. Those disappear, okay, and now we no longer have it. You can also do the same thing where we can hide things. So if we didn't want this big header, we could hide that and replace it with something else. So we'll do some more editing in a later lesson.